M3gan 2.0 is an action comedy sci-fi movie directed by Gerard Johnstone. The movie stars Jenna Davis, Amie Donald, Allison Williams, Violet McGraw, and Ivanna Sakhno. This movie follows the first movie after the underlying tech for M3gan is stolen and misused by a powerful defense contractor to create a military-grade weapon known as Amelia. M3gan's creator Gemma realizes that the only option is to resurrect M3gan and give her a few upgrades, making her faster, stronger, and more lethal. I was one of the few people who seemingly wasn't a fan of the original M3gan movie. I thought it was a poor excuse for a horror movie that tried way too hard to take itself seriously, while also trying too hard to be campy and funny. It's just another Blumhouse product which we see many of nowadays. Obviously, wasn't exactly anticipating a sequel to this, but it was inevitable. From what I remember, I don't even know if the first movie set itself up for a sequel, but in the modern landscape of Hollywood, this is what we have to deal with. So, how does this movie compare to the original movie? Well, let's find out. I'm going to start by talking about the performances, starting with the actress that plays M3gan, or M3gan, however you want to pronounce it. This is difficult to talk about since there are separate people working here. One person does the voice and another person does the physical work for M3gan. I'll do my best to talk about the two actresses to get a full feel for the performance. Jenna Davis is the voice of M3gan. For those who don't know her, she started her career as a child actress, then moved on to being a TikToker, so take that information for what you will. There isn't too much to say about the vocal performance. While her voice is put through a bunch of different effects, there's an element to her where she replicates a robotic sounding voice on her own, which she is able to do admittedly pretty well. Obviously, with this kind of voice, she doesn't evoke too much emotion because she can't really show that with the character, which does get in the way of caring about things the character is either doing or saying. But as far as replicating a robot voice, the girl does okay. Amie Donald provides the body for M3gan for the few occasions where they actually decide to use a real performer. Admittedly, from watching the movie, it gets really difficult to tell when an actual performer is used and when it's either CGI or animatronic. I think the performance mainly comes through the action scenes, and from what I can tell, the woman does a good job at making it believable of being capable of the skills that are shown on screen, which I'm sure was achieved through training in pre-production. Allison Williams reprises her role as Gemma. She's known for having a role in the movie Get Out. It must be the role this woman picks all the time, because I gotta give her credit for seemingly being able to act like such an unlikable person. This of course is mainly down to the writing, but it's just annoying watching her go over her own morals throughout the runtime of this. You can never fully gauge how she feels about things, and on top of that, I didn't care enough about what her character was doing to ever sympathize with what was going on. Whenever she's in moments of peril, she doesn't do a great job of conveying any emotions relating to terror. Half the time, it just feels like an inconvenience for her. She's a pretty bad protagonist, but the actress isn't completely terrible. It's more so down to how her character is written. Violet McGraw reprises her role as Katie, which whenever I hear that name always sounds like Katie, but it's spelled Cady, which that alone is pretty stupid. Unfortunately, despite this girl being older than she was in the first movie, her acting skill leaves a lot to be desired. There's times where almost every line she speaks sounds like they did it in one take and didn't bother to do anything else with it, which is sad to see. There's a scene in this movie where she walks in on someone being choked and it barely phases her. She has the most deadpan reaction on her face as to what's happening. A little more emotion would have been nice to see. Ivanna Sakhno plays Amelia, who is the main villain of this movie. She is another robot like M3gan, but is meant to be better. The woman does a decent job at acting like a robot, especially in terms of her body mannerisms. Her voice doesn't have as much modulation as M3gan's voice actress does, so half the time she sounds like a normal person, which gets distracting at times, but other aspects she pulls off well is acting menacingly, whether it be scowling at people or delivering a line with such coldness. Jemaine Clement shows up in this movie for a bit too, which I was pretty surprised by. I didn't even realize he was in the cast until seeing this movie. He provides a bit of comedic relief here, which I actually thought he did well at, even if the jokes themselves were all that great. The way he delivers his lines is good enough to elevate them to the point where I got a chuckle or two. He makes the most of the screen time he has on screen, and I can safely say he steals every scene he's in for the time that he's in it. The plot of this movie has quite a lot going on in it, most of it not very good and borderline makes no fucking sense. People may find this section of the video nitpicky, but to say the problems I have with this thing, I have to break down the plot as much as I can from what I remember. Thankfully, I remember quite a bit. At the time of me writing this, I literally only had come out of the cinema about 30 minutes ago. Some of the things I talk about may border on spoilers, so if if that's not something you want to see in this video, I'd recommend clicking away now. The movie immediately reestablishes its genre shift, which I have to say already is one of the biggest, dumbest decisions of this franchise that I've seen. The first movie is a horror. Granted, it's not very scary, but it's clearly just a straight horror movie. This thing sells itself as being a T2 Terminator type of movie, with it furthering itself into the sci-fi genre and making itself even more of a comedy. On one hand, this is good because I thought that the original movie took itself way too seriously for the premise that it had. It's a completely stupid gimmick though, and it makes no real sense other than to possibly get more younger audiences to watch the movie, which is stupid because the original movie was already clearly aimed at a young audience. One of the aspects that shifts this to a sci-fi immediately as this movie starts is a moment where there's text on screen, complete with that glitching, mechanical, beeping sound, you know the one. The first scene in the movie is an action scene which shows glimpses of some hyper-violence, but because this is a Blumhouse movie, they have to stay in the realm of PG-13. We never actually see this stuff, so my immediate question is why include it at all in the first place? A little bit later, we catch up with the characters from the first movie and see things Katie is doing, including apparently idolizing Steven Seagal. I thought this aspect made no sense whatsoever. What girl, who they say in the movie is 12, in the year 2025, has any liking to Steven Seagal? Has she seen his movies? Does she listen to this shit? It just shows this movie was written by an old white guy or even a board of writers, because while my dumbass couldn't know what women are into, I sure as fuck know the writers of this movie do not know either. On the flip side of this, we see Gemma and we see her ideals make absolutely no sense. She's a woman in the tech industry that also seems to be very against social media, the usage of phones or iPads, and is against AI. While I agree with the AI angle, it just doesn't make sense for a woman in this field to be against the thing she works with. It reads like the writer pushing their ideals into the character of the movie. Before talking about the plot any further, I should note that there is an abundance of product placement in this movie, from a tech guy eating Cheetos to a scene which reads like a car commercial. Moments like this really made my eyes roll. One scene I did get a kick out of, I will admit, was the introduction of Jemaine Clement's character. He rolls up in this Professor X looking wheelchair and a brain chip that lets him see things through his eyes like Tony Stark, and the guy really plays into it well. The movie decides to take everything over the top, and I will admit this is one of the few instances where I did find it a little funny. A few minutes later after the scene, we see this foreign guy in a hotel room, and Amelia is breaking out of the guy's suitcase, and somehow he doesn't hear the mechanical whirlings of a cyborg getting out of there, which obviously is for plot convenience, but it's still really dumb. In another example of plot convenience, this black op invades Gemma and Katie's house and is tricked by seeing a cop on TV. We see the TV very clearly in his line of sight, so it's insane that this tricks him. We are then subjected to a Home Alone routine, complete with the Black Ops guys falling over ice scoops. Hilarious. Most of the rest of the plot is pretty boring, I'll admit. It just follows Megan and the rest of the crew trying to find Amelia to stop her. Most of the time, I just didn't care at all. There's an unfortunate moment near the end where Megan shows off a video to which Gemma's character says an AI hologram Megan makes, so it really sucks to see the filmmakers actually use AI in the movie. During the third act of this movie, we are presented with a plot twist which is incredibly obvious. Anyone with more than 2 brain cells could see it coming a mile away, and they play it up like it's a massive revelation. That's pretty much the gist of this whole movie, so you can tell why it isn't exactly favorable to me. And like I said before, I know it probably sounds really nitpicky, but I just needed to express a lot of the really dumb things I found about this movie before talking about any of the other aspects. Moving on, I want to talk about the effects of this movie. I'll give the filmmakers credit. At least there's times where it's obvious they use animatronics here instead of 100% CGI. But when there is CGI, it leaves a lot to be desired. The villain robot looks way too much like a human. Sure, Megan is meant to look like a person, but there's still aspects that makes it obvious she's a robot. But here, the villain just looks exactly like a human. I'm not really sure what they were going for here. The first time we even see Megan, she is in fairness projected onto some screens. But despite this, there's something about her design that doesn't look right. The effects on her design just don't look all that great. Sometimes the effects aren't too bad throughout the runtime. There are a couple of janky effects here and there, but for the most part, it's fine. I think for the most part, this movie is shot well enough. Toby Oliver did the cinematography for this movie. He did cinematography for Get Out and the Happy Death Day movies, so he has a decent resume there. There's very few incidents of style here. In a training montage, there are some crash zooms that evoke classic Hong Kong action cinema, even though it's mainly there as a joke. That's pretty much the extent to the style that this movie has, unfortunately. I should talk about the horror in this movie since this is a sequel to a horror movie, but it isn't from what I've told you already. There isn't really much to tell about the quote-unquote horror other than the fact that they throw in a few jump scares here and there to validate this being a horror movie. All of these jump scares, in true Blumhouse fashion, are done very predictably, and they are never, ever good. They just never stick when they're on screen. The score for this movie is composed by a man called Chris Bacon, who has done some work on some animated films, like Space Chimps. If you remember that, you earn a veteran's discount. There isn't anything of note with this score. Again, to validate this movie being classed as a horror, there is times some generic horror music, complete with some moments that include a rising violin, is played. It's just background music that isn't meant to leave much of an impact. It's very bland and even boring to listen to at times. If you couldn't tell from the review, I didn't like this movie very much. I don't get the hype with any of them. Another aspect I find truly strange is how through the marketing of this movie, they seem to be trying to make Megan a queer icon. I want to preface that there's absolutely nothing wrong with queer representation in the media in the slightest. That's not why I'm bringing this up. My reason I bring it up is I genuinely don't understand why the company is choosing to market the movie like this when you watch the movies themselves. There's absolutely zero indication of Megan or any of the characters for that matter being queer. There isn't even subtext to it, but it's all over the marketing. You have Chapel Roan music playing in the trailers. You have Megan making a video essentially saying trans rights, which firstly is great, of course. If they're simply using it to have a platform to speak on trans rights, that's more than cool. I just hope to God it isn't fake and it's not just some corporation rainbow type deal solely doing this in order to sell more tickets. I pray that this isn't the case and that their intentions are pure. They seem to be more focused on marketing than making a good movie. Clearly the marketing didn't work since I saw this in a completely empty theater. I'm giving M3gan 2.0 or M3gan 2.0, however you want to pronounce it, 1 star. This is a pretty badly acted, complete mess of a movie that really doesn't know what it wants to be. Too much happens and nothing happens at the same time. The movie is annoying and riddled with idiotic plot holes that make for a more unbearable watch the more the movie goes on. Maybe I'm too cynical, maybe this movie isn't for me, but I can surely say I won't be recommending this to anyone. No fans of any genre should be subjected to this. However, if my review hasn't swayed your opinion, it's still in theaters and I will always be an advocate for the cinema experience, so even if the movie leaves a lot to be desired, there's still that aspect to look forward to.